The room was silent, too silent, as if the world outside had been cut away. A single chair stood in the corner, and upon it sat the doll, its painted grin stretched unnaturally wide, glassy eyes glimmering faintly in the dark, reflecting a light that wasn't there. The air hung heavy, stale, and for a moment nothing moved until the stillness broke with a scream that tore through the house like shattered glass. The overhead bulb flickered violently, shadows leaping across the walls, stretching and twisting. Like living things, a sudden slam shook the door, rattling it against its hinges, as though something inside the room refused to let anyone leave. The chair creaked, the doll's head tilting ever so slightly, as if acknowledging the chaos it had caused. People who entered this house would later swear they felt eyes on them. The piercing weight of being watched, though no one else was there. The doll never blinked, never shifted, yet its gaze seemed to follow, marking each soul that dared step too close. The scream echoed, not once, but again, like it had been swallowed by the walls and thrown back, distorted, mocking, and then came the whisper, low, hushed, almost tender, wrapping itself around the trembling silence. This isn't just a toy, it's a curse. Some might laugh at that, brush it off as superstition, but those who stood there knew differently. They felt the cold crawling down their spines, the unnatural drop in temperature, the way their breath fogged in the air as though they had been plunged into another world. The doll sat still, but its presence grew larger, filling the room until there was no escaping it. A house that once held warmth and laughter was now a place of dread. Families avoided it, neighbors whispered, and yet the doll remained untouched, unmoving, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to carry it into their home, because this was never meant to be a child's toy. It was a vessel, a disguise, a doorway into something unspeakable, and once opened, that doorway could never be closed. But this was only the beginning. What followed was pure horror. The house on Rosewood Lane was the kind people slowed down to admire. Red bricks warmed by afternoon light, a white fence trimmed with flowers and wind chimes that sang whenever the breeze passed through. Inside, it smelled of cinnamon tea and fresh laundry. Laughter often echoed through the halls, and the kind of quiet that meant safety wrapped around every room like a blanket. It was here, in this peaceful corner of the world, that the Miller family lived. Donna, a schoolteacher with kind eyes, David, a quiet man with rough hands from honest work, and their 7-year-old daughter, Lily, a bright-eyed child who still believed her stuffed animals could understand her. The Labubu doll arrived on a Sunday afternoon. Anna had spotted it at a local flea market, tucked between porcelain teacups and dusty music boxes. Its strange, impish face caught her attention. Not quite a teddy bear, not quite a goblin. "It's different," she said with a smile. Lily's face lit up. "He looks funny, can I name him?" They didn't think twice. For $5, it was hers. Back at home, Lily carried the doll everywhere. She named him Boo Boo and introduced him to every toy in her room. "He's my favorite," she whispered as she tucked him beside her pillow that night. Anna watched from the doorway, heart warm at the sight. Childhood innocence, she thought. How lucky we are. But by the second night, something shifted. David found Lily sitting upright in bed at 2 a.m. whispering softly. "Who are you talking to, sweetheart?" he asked. Lily blinked slowly. "Boo Boo." He was telling me a story. Her eyes were wide but calm, her tone so casual it unnerved him. David chuckled uneasily, patted her head, and led her back under the covers. Kids had wild imaginations, he told himself. The next morning, Anna noticed Boo Boo wasn't in bed. She found him sitting upright in the hallway facing the stairs. "Lily, did you move him?" "No, Mummy," she said, eyes glued to her cereal. "He wanted to see the downstairs." Anna smiled, though a chill brushed the back of her neck as the week passed. The doll appeared in stranger places, balanced on the windowsill, perched on the bathroom counter, once even sitting at the dining table with a spoon resting beside him. Lily would giggle when asked, but her explanations became stranger. "He doesn't like the dark," she'd say. Or, "He wanted to watch Daddy sleep." One evening while tucking Lily in, Anna heard her whispering again. This time she listened from the hallway. The voice was one-sided, Lily's tone hushed and serious. "I won't tell them," she said softly. "I promise." Anna stepped in. "Honey, who are you talking to?" Lily froze. "Nobody," she murmured, eyes darting to the doll. That night, as the house fell silent and the lights dimmed, Anna stood in the doorway of her daughter's room. The moonlight poured in through the window, casting shadows across the floor. Boo Boo sat upright on the pillow beside Lily, staring directly at the door, his grin wider than she remembered. What seemed like play was the first warning sign. At first, The family dismissed it. A misplaced toy, a child's forgetful hand, nothing unusual in a home filled with playthings. Yet the Labudo seemed to have a habit of moving itself in ways that couldn't be explained. On Tuesday, Anna left Boo Boo on Lily's bed before heading to the kitchen. When she returned moments later, he was propped against the window, staring out at the street as though he had been waiting for someone to arrive. She frowned, lifted him back to his place on the pillow, and told herself Lily must have snuck in and moved him without her noticing. But Lily was outside in the yard the entire time. Later that week, David spotted the doll on the sofa, remote in its lap, angled toward the television. He muttered under his breath, amused at first. But when he asked Lily why she'd left her toy downstairs, she shook her head solemnly. "I didn't put him there, Daddy. He moves on his own." David laughed uneasily. "Sweetheart, dolls don't move by themselves." But the look in Lily's eyes wasn't playful. It was steady, serious, the kind of gaze that chilled him because children rarely lie without reason. Nights grew restless. Anna woke to faint scratching sounds in the hallway, soft and irregular, like nails dragging across the wooden floor. At first she blamed mice, but when she rose to check, she found the doll sitting upright by the bedroom door, facing inward, its plastic grin catching the sliver of moonlight that the following night. The sound came again, but different. A faint giggle echoed down the hall, high-pitched and quick, like a child's laugh. Anna froze in her bed, certain Lily was awake. Yet when she peeked into her daughter's room, Lily was fast asleep, her breathing deep and steady. Boo Boo sat beside her, his head slightly tilted, as though listening to a secret joke only he could hear. By now, the house itself seemed to bend around the doll's presence. The family felt watched, even when Boo Boo was just a lump of fabric and thread, motionless on a shelf. There was something in the Iran attention, heavy and focused, like eyes pressing against the back of their necks. David, ever the skeptic, tried to rationalize, "We're tired, we're overeating, it's just a toy." But Anna noticed the subtle shift. Lily grew paler each day, her once bright laughter replaced with whispers to the doll when she thought no one was listening. She no longer wanted to play with her other toys. Her drawings at school turned darker, of shadowy shapes surrounding a grinning figure with wide eyes. One evening, Anna asked gently, "Lily, what do you and Boo Boo talk about?" Lily's lips pressed together, hesitant. Finally, she whispered, "He tells me secrets." "What kind of secrets?" Her daughter's voice was matter-of-fact, unsettling in its calmness. "He tells me things about you and Daddy, things I'm not supposed to know." Anna's heart skipped. She pressed further, but Lily only shook her head, clutched the doll to her chest, and refused to say more. That night, David set Boo Boo on the highest shelf in the living room, determined to put an end to the nonsense. But when he came downstairs the next morning, the doll was sitting at the kitchen table, chair pulled out as if it had been waiting for breakfast. The air grew colder with each passing day, a constant chill lingering in corners where the doll was placed. Anna swore the shadows shifted more quickly near it, like the light itself bent away. And Lily, sweet, innocent Lily now, defended Boo Boo fiercely, snapping at her parents whenever they tried to move him. The breaking point came late one stormy night. Rain hammered the windows, thunder rolled, and the power flickered. Anna jolted, awake to the sound of Lily's laughter echoing through the hall. She hurried to her daughter's room, heart pounding, only to find Lily asleep, her lips parted in dreams. The laugh, however, still rang out soft, lingering, and not coming from Lily at all. Anna turned slowly, her breath catching in her throat. Boo Boo sat in the corner of the room, not on the bed where he'd been left. His painted grin stretched wider than before. The plastic seemed tugged unnaturally upward, as though the doll itself had learned how to smile. But then, the doll's smile changed. The house that once radiated warmth now seemed to breathe with unease. Light bulbs flickered unpredictably, buzzing before dimming into a low glow, only to flare up again without reason. At first, David changed the bulbs, muttering about faulty wiring, but after the third electrician insisted there was nothing wrong, even his stubborn rationality began to waver. Objects shifted and fell with increasing frequency. A vase on the mantelpiece tipped and shattered while no one was near. Picture frames slipped from their hooks, glass scattering across the floor. The noise always came from the rooms where the doll was kept, and though no one admitted it out loud, each of them knew. Boo Boo was at the center of it all. Even the pets refused to go near him. Their cat, once fond of curling at the foot of Lily's bed, now hissed whenever it approached the door to her room. Its fur would bristle, back arched, before it bolted down the hall. The family dog whined constantly, pacing the living room at night, ears pinned flat. Whenever the doll sat in plain sight, the animals pressed themselves against the farthest wall, trembling. Meanwhile, Lily was changing. Her cheeks lost their glow, her skin paling as though color itself was being drained from her. Dark circles bloomed beneath her eyes, evidence of nights spent sleepless. When asked, she would mumble the same thing over and over. "He talks to me. What does he say?" Anna would whisper, kneeling by her bedside. "He tells me stories," Lily said once, her gaze unfocused, voice distant. Stories about people who scream. The words clung to Anna's thoughts like cobwebs. She wanted to believe it was a child's imagination, but the heaviness in Lily's tone so empty, so adult left her shaken. David, however, refused to entertain the idea. "She's making it up. Kids have imaginary friends. That's all this is." His voice was firm, but Anna saw the tightness in his jaw, the way he avoided the doll's eyes whenever he spoke. Arguments began to fill the house. Anna insisted something was wrong, that they couldn't ignore the signs. David snapped back that fear was feeding the madness, that they were frightening Lily with their paranoia. But the arguments always ended the same way. Silence, both of them turning away, neither comforted by their own explanations. And still the nights grew worse. It started with footsteps, soft, deliberate, pacing the hallway long after everyone was in bed. Anna would rise, convinced she'd find Lily out of bed, but her daughter was always asleep. The footsteps never stopped when she looked sometimes. They even grew louder, bolder, until they seemed to circle her in the dark. Then came the laughter, not Lily's innocent giggle, but a thin, sharp sound, quick as a blade. It echoed through the walls, impossible to trace. At times it seemed to seep from the vents, other times from the corners of Lily's room, even when her lips never moved. Worst of all was the doll itself. Boo Boo was never where they left him. Anna placed him on the dresser one night, only to wake and find him sitting at the edge of Lily's bed, facing the child as she slept. Another night, David swore he had locked the doll in the attic. Hours later, the scratching began again, loud, frantic, just above their heads, until at last they found Boo Boo back in Lily's arms. The tension devoured the household. Anna grew brittle, jumping at every sound. David stayed longer at work, unwilling to face the nights. Lily no longer laughed, no longer ran through the house the way children do. She clutched Boo Boo constantly, whispering secrets into its ear. Her eyes glazed as if her soul was slipping further away. One stormy evening, the house plunged into chaos. The lights flickered violently, plunging rooms into alternating shadow and brilliance. A framed photograph flew from the wall, shattering on the floor just inches from Anna's feet. The dog howled, clawing at the door to escape, while Lily sat calmly in her bed, stroking the doll's fabric ear. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice lost beneath the thunder. "He just wants to play." That was when David broke. Grabbing the doll, he hurled it into the corner, shouting, "It's just a toy." But when the room fell silent, when every flicker of the bulb ceased, and the air itself seemed to hold its breath, even he couldn't deny the truth pressing in around them, because the doll was no longer facing the corner where it had landed. Slowly, impossibly, it had turned, its painted grin fixed on them once more. And then came the night they finally saw it move. Anna woke with a start, her chest tight as though something had pressed down on her while she slept. The room was silent except for the faint rattle of rain against the window. She rolled onto her side, reaching for David, but her hand met only cold sheets. Before she could call for him, her gaze shifted and froze. The doll was standing by her bed, its stubby legs balanced upright on the floorboards, its stitched smile turned upward toward her face. It should have been impossible. Its limbs were sewn too stiff, its body too soft, yet there it stood, motionless, watching. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She blinked, hoping her mind was playing tricks, but when her eyes opened, Boo Boo hadn't moved. He was still there, closer now, his glassy stare gleaming in the moonlight. She screamed. David burst through the doorway seconds later, breathless, his eyes darting between Anna and the floor. But the doll was no longer standing, it was back on the dresser, slumped in its usual seated pose. Anna shook her head furiously. "It was here, David. I swear, it was here." He put his arms around her, but his gaze never left the doll. For the first time, he didn't argue. He didn't call it imagination. From that night on, mirrors in the house became their enemy. While brushing her teeth one morning, Anna saw a figure flicker in the reflection, tall, shadowed, standing directly behind her. She spun around, but the bathroom was empty. In the mirror though, Boo Boo sat perched on the counter, staring with its painted grin. Yet when she turned again, the doll wasn't there. The same happened to David, shaving. One evening, his reflection seemed wrong, lagging behind, moving slower than him, and in the corner of the glass, a figure hunched low with eyes like burning coal. He slammed the mirror cabinet shut, sweat pouring down his temples. From then on, neither of them lingered in front of glass. The house bore scars too. Scratches appeared on the walls, long, uneven, carved deep into the plaster as if by claws. At first, they blamed the cat, until one morning they found fresh gashes high above where any animal could reach. Then the scratches spread to the furniture, to the bedroom door, and finally to their own skin. David woke with 3 jagged lines down his forearm, crimson welts that burned as though freshly made. Anna's shoulder bore the same marks days. Later, both of them had felt nothing in their sleep. Through it all, Lily clung tighter to the doll. When Anna tried to take it away, her daughter's screams echoed through the house, raw and piercing. "You can't. He'll be angry," she sobbed, wrapping her arms around Boo Boo as if protecting him. Her small frame trembled violently, her face pale, her eyes wild. Anna recoiled, tears brimming in her own eyes. She wanted to tell her daughter the truth, to shake the doll from her grasp, to end it all. But the fear in Lily's voice cut through her resolve. If a child was this terrified of angering it, what would happen if they truly forced it away? The air in the house grew heavier by the day. Every corner felt suffocating. Every shadow stretched too long. The laughter returned, louder, crueler. Even David, who had once dismissed it all, now kept the bedroom door locked at night, a useless attempt to bar something that needed no door to enter. It was clear to both of them now. The doll wasn't just watching, it was acting, reaching out, leaving marks not just on their walls but on their lives. And when they finally tried to rid themselves of it, when they thought they could end it all with one desperate choice, they learned the most terrifying truth of all. They thought they could get rid of it. They were wrong. David could no longer deny it. The scratches on his skin, the footsteps in the hallway, the way his daughter clutched the doll as if it were her only lifeline. Every instinct screamed that Boo Boo was not just a toy. It was a parasite, and if he didn't stop it, it would consume them all. So one grey morning before Anna or Lily awoke, he grabbed the doll and shoved it into a trash bag. He carried it outside, heart hammering, and hurled it into the rusted metal bin at the end of the street. "Stay there," he muttered under his breath, slamming the lid shut. He returned to the house, chest heaving, relieved for the first time in weeks. But when Anna stepped into Lily's room hours later, Boo Boo was sitting neatly on the bed, its grin brighter than ever. The bag outside was gone, the bin empty. Night David drove the doll miles away, into the woods on the far side of town. He buried it beneath damp earth and stones, sweating as though he were committing a crime. He whispered to himself, "This time it's over." But when he returned home, he found the doll propped on the kitchen counter, one ear torn from the shovel's edge, mud still clinging to its fabric. His hands trembled as he told Anna, "It doesn't want to leave." She stared at him, her face pale, lips pressed thin. "It's not about what we want," she whispered. In desperation, David built a fire in the backyard pit. He tossed the doll onto the flames, watching its fabric curl and blacken. The flames roared higher, sparks flying into the night. For a moment he believed he'd done it until a sharp high-pitched scream split the air. It wasn't Lily's voice, nor Anna's. It was something older, raw, a cry of rage that rattled through the trees. The fire died down instantly, as if smothered by an unseen hand, and when the smoke cleared, the doll sat untouched on the ashes, its grin unchanged, its glassy eyes glinting in the dark. Word of the family's torment spread quietly through the neighborhood. Neighbors whispered when the Millers passed, their voices trembling with both pity and fear. Some claimed they had seen lights flickering violently through the Miller windows at night, shadows pacing back and forth across the curtains. Others swore they heard screams carried on the wind, screams that didn't sound entirely human. Finally, Anna turned to the one person in town who might understand. Old Mrs. Navarro, a woman with silver hair and a cane, had lived on Rosewood Lane for half a century. She listened silently as Anna poured out the story, her hands twisting in her lap, her voice breaking with each word. When she finished, Mrs. Navarro leaned forward, her dark eyes heavy with knowing. "It chooses its family," the elder said quietly, "and it never leaves willingly." Anna shivered. "Then what do we do?" The old woman shook her head. "Pray, endure, or pay its price." The words haunted Anna as she walked home, her footsteps quickening in the fading light. From that night on, the activity escalated beyond anything they had endured before. Doors slammed shut on their own, trapping them inside rooms until minutes later they would swing open with bone-rattling force. Windows shattered without warning, glass exploding inward as though struck from outside, yet no figure ever appeared. The laughter returned louder, sharper, accompanied now by low guttural growls that vibrated through the walls. Lily grew weaker, her body thinner, eyes sunken with sleepless nights. Yet she clung to Boo Boo with ferocity, snarling if anyone tried to pry him from her arms. Sometimes Anna found her daughter standing in the hallway in the dead of night, whispering to the doll in a language she didn't recognize. Other times she caught Lily staring blankly into space, lips moving silently, as though repeating instructions only she could hear. One evening, the family gathered in the living room, the air tense, the house trembling with unseen energy. The dog barked furiously at the empty corner, hair bristling, before collapsing suddenly as though struck. David bent to touch it, but the dog's body was cold, its eyes glassy, its breath gone. Anna screamed. The doll sat in Lily's lap, grinning. From that moment, every night became an assault. The walls shook, dishes shattered, unseen claws raked along the floorboards. Lights flickered until bulbs burst overhead, showering sparks. The house groaned under invisible pressure, as though it would collapse upon itself, and always threaded through the chaos was that laughter mocking merciless, as if the doll itself delighted in their unraveling. David barricaded the doors, nailed windows shut, but nothing stopped the torment. He and Anna clung to each other in the dark, their marriage fraying under the strain, their every breath filled with dread. They thought they had reached the peak of horror. They thought the scratches, the screams, the shattered glass were the worst the doll could bring, but the house itself seemed to pulse now, alive with malevolence, every wall closing in with the promise of more suffering to come, because Boo Boo had not finished with them. The whispers that curled from Lily's lips grew sharper, darker. Sometimes, in the half-light, her eyes seemed to glow faintly, her smile too wide to belong to her, and when Anna finally begged her, "Please, baby, put him down, please," Lily only shook her head. "He's not done yet," she said softly. "He wants something more." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The house fell into silence then, the kind that pressed against their ears, heavy and expectant. In the stillness, the doll shifted ever so slightly in Lily's arms, its fabric hands curling into fists, but the worst was yet to come. The doll wanted blood. The transformation began subtly, so subtle that Anna tried to convince herself it was only exhaustion, only the toll of sleepless nights. But soon there was no denying it, her daughter was no longer her daughter. Lily's eyes, once bright with innocence, seemed darker now, ringed with shadows that made her look years older. When she smiled, it stretched too far, the corners of her lips curling unnaturally, as though mimicking the doll she held so tightly. Her laughter chilled the air. It no longer rang with childish delight but cracked and sharp, rising at odd moments, when nothing was funny. Sometimes she would sit in silence for hours, Boo Boo in her lap, her thin fingers stroking the fabric ear while her shoulders jerked with silent giggles. At other times she whispered, and though Anna leaned close, she could never catch the words, only a low hiss, rhythmic, too measured to belong to a child. The doll seemed fused to her now. She would not eat without it in her lap, would not sleep unless it was tucked beneath her arm. Even in the bath, she insisted on holding it, its fabric darkening with water, its grin never fading. David tried once to pull it away, but Lily's scream was so piercing, so raw, it sent him stumbling back in terror. For a moment her eyes flashed, black and glinting, and the lights in the house flickered violently. It was Anna who finally broke, voice trembling as she said the words neither wanted to speak. "We need help. This isn't something we can fight." David hesitated, but when he looked at his daughter, her lips moving in a silent chant, her gaze fixed on a corner where no one stood, he knew she was right. They called Father Morales, a local priest known for his work in cleansing houses, where others dared not go. He arrived one evening with a leather-bound Bible in his hand and a crucifix gleaming faintly in the dim light. He studied Lily quietly, his face betraying no expression as she sat on the couch, doll in her lap, eyes unblinking. "It is not the child," he murmured. "It is what has attached itself through the toy." The ritual began at midnight. Candles flickered in every corner of the living room, their flames bending sideways though no wind blew. Father Morales chanted prayers in a steady, commanding voice, his crucifix held high. At first, Lily sat still, staring blankly ahead, Boo Boo pressed against her chest. But as the words filled the air, she began to shake. Her lips curled back, and a laugh ripped from her throat, deep guttural. Nothing like the voice of a little girl, the house responded. The walls trembled, picture frames crashing to the ground. Shadows thickened in the corners, stretching upward like hands clawing toward the ceiling. The temperature plummeted, frost forming across the window panes as though winter had invaded the room. "Do not stop," Father Morales commanded when Anna screamed. He pressed forward, chanting louder, sprinkling holy water that hissed when it touched the doll. Lily writhed, her limbs thrashing violently, yet her hands never loosened their grip on Boo Boo. The crucifix shook in the priest's hand as an unseen force slammed against him, driving him back a step. David rushed forward, but the priest barked, "Stay back, it is not finished." The lights above burst in unison, glass raining down. The room plunged into chaos, doors slamming, furniture toppling, the growl of something inhuman vibrating through the floor. Lily arched backward, eyes rolling white, mouth open in a scream that was not her own. And still, the doll sat perfectly still in her lap, its painted grin fixed, its button eyes gleaming as though feeding on every ounce of fear in the room. Father Morales shouted the final words of the rite, his voice hoarse but unyielding. The candles flared, shadows recoiled, the air splitting with a crack so loud it rattled their bones. For one fleeting moment, silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Anna dared to hope it was over. She reached for her daughter, whispering her name, tears streaming down her face. Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering, her chest heaving shallow breaths. But then, in the stillness, a sound emerged, low, guttural, echoing from a place no child could reach. Anna froze, her blood turning to ice. For the first time since it entered their home, the doll shifted on its own, its fabric jaw stretched, seams splitting, as something far too real forced its way forward. And then, the doll opened its mouth. The house had become a battlefield. On the last night, the air itself rebelled against them, windows shattered inward with invisible blows, glass scattering like rain across the floor, tables lifted from their legs and hurled themselves into walls, cabinet doors banged open and shut in a deafening rhythm, as though the house had grown a heartbeat of its own. At the center of it all was Lily. She no longer stood, she floated. Her small body rose from the couch, hair streaming upward as if pulled by unseen strings. Her eyes were gone, consumed by blackness, and her mouth opened in a soundless scream. In her arms, clutched as tightly as ever, sat the Labuda, but now its grin was different. It was wider, more grotesque, its button eyes glowing faintly with a hungry fire. Father Morales stood firm, shouting his prayers above the chaos. His crucifix burned bright in the flickering candlelight, but his voice faltered as the floorboards split and a roar surged through the house like the breath of a beast. "It's too strong," he gasped. "Something binds it here." Anna clutched her chest, the truth striking her with brutal clarity. The doll wasn't only attached to Lily, it had fed on their love, their fear, their memories. Something of theirs had become its anchor. Her eyes darted around the room and landed on a small wooden box resting on the shelf, their keepsake chest, filled with mementos from the years they'd built together. Wedding photos, letters, Lily's first drawing, every piece infused with their joy, their devotion. Tears blurred her vision, but she understood. To sever the curse, they would have to sacrifice what bound them most. David shook his head violently when she reached for it. "No, we can't, we have to," she screamed, her voice breaking as the room shook harder. Lily's body twisted, in the air, her head lolling unnaturally as the doll's giggle filled the house. Anna seized the box, her hands trembling as she hurled it into the fire roaring in the hearth. The flames devoured the wood instantly, curling the photographs into ash, erasing years of memories in seconds. The effect was immediate. The doll shrieked. Its sound was not mechanical, not childlike, but the raw howl of something ancient and vengeful being torn from the world. Lily's body dropped hard onto the floor as the Lababu writhed in her hands, seams bursting, fabric blackening. Its button eyes popped with a hiss, releasing a foul smoke that filled the room. The house convulsed one last time, every wall groaning, every window rattling as though the structure itself might collapse. Then, as the doll melted into a pile of smoldering ash, everything stopped. Silence. The air was still, heavy with the scent of smoke and the sting of salt from their tears. Lily coughed weakly, her small hands trembling as Anna pulled her close, rocking her, whispering her name over and over as though to anchor her back to life. David dropped to his knees, clutching Anna and Lily together, the three of them bound. In grief and relief, Father Morales crossed himself slowly, his shoulders slumping in exhaustion. "It is finished," he murmured, though his eyes lingered uneasily on the blackened patch where the doll had burned away. The house was silent now, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of something that had been torn out, leaving behind scars that would never fade. The Miller family would carry this night forever, etched into their bones, whispered in their dreams. They thought it was over, or so they thought. Morning came like a stranger. The Miller home stood quiet, its walls still blackened from candle smoke, its floors littered with the debris of a battle no outsider would ever believe. Anna sat at the kitchen table, her trembling hands wrapped around a cup of untouched tea. David leaned silently against the wall, staring at nothing. Between them, Lily played absently with a strand of her mother's hair, her wide eyes hollow, her lips sealed shut. Since that night she had not spoken a single word. The family had survived, but survival was not the same as freedom. Their home, once filled with laughter and warmth, now carried a stillness too heavy to breathe in. Every creak of the floorboards at night made their hearts race. Every faint whisper of wind against the windows carried an echo they did not dare follow. They knew the doll was gone, or so they believed, but the memory of its presence clung to the walls like smoke that could never be aired out. Anna sometimes woke to the sound of faint giggles, dismissing them as dreams until she saw Lily bolt upright in bed, eyes wide, listening to the same phantom sound. David tried to repair the scratches on the walls, to paint over the marks, but no matter how many coats he laid down, the grooves bled back through, stubborn and mocking. The house bore the truth, and it refused to forget. Neighbors whispered. Of course, they had heard the screams, seen the windows shatter, and some even claimed to have glimpsed shadows writhing inside the house that final night. But the Millers never explained, never invited questions. They carried their silence as both shield and curse. And in that silence came the reflection. The Lababu doll had not come to them by chance. They had chosen it, innocently, even eagerly drawn. By its rarity, its novelty, the thrill of owning something no one else had. But what they thought was harmless curiosity had opened the door to horror. What seemed like a simple toy revealed the darker truth, that some objects carry hunger, and some hungers cannot be controlled. The narrator's voice returns, low and warning. Curiosity, greed, the temptation of innocent things, these are invitations. Invitations for darkness to step in, because not every toy is meant to be played with. Not every smile is meant to bring joy. And sometimes, the very things we treat as harmless are the ones that cost us most dearly. The Miller family moved forward, scarred but alive. They would never speak the doll's name again, never risk passing its curse through stories or memory. And yet, deep down, they all carried the same fear that it wasn't truly gone, that its ashes were not an ending but a seed waiting to grow again. For somewhere, in some shop window, or tucked away in a forgotten attic, another Labubu waits. And this time, it may be watching you. This was the story of the Lababu doll, a tale that began with innocence and ended in terror. What seemed like nothing more than a playful collectible became the doorway to a nightmare, leaving one family scarred forever. They thought they were safe when the doll turned to ash, but the truth lingers like smoke. Evil does not vanish. It waits. And so we return to the title, to the name that now feels heavier, darker, the Labu doll. It's not just a story, not just a warning. It is a reminder that sometimes the things we invite into our homes, the things we dismiss as harmless, carry shadows we can never control. But what about you? Have you ever seen something moved when it shouldn't have? Heard whispers in the night when no one was there? Or felt a pair of unseen eyes watching you from the dark corner of your room? Share your story in the comments below. You never know who else might have lived through something similar. And if you want more stories like this, more tales where shadows walk and nightmares breathe, then stay close. Subscribe, if you dare, because the next story may be even darker than this one.